Story 1. I knew a woman who had the unusual hobby of reporting people to Child Protective Services for no reason. If she was angry with someone, she would report them to Child Protective Services. If she was bored, she would report someone to Child Protective Services. If it was raining, she would report someone to Child Protective Services. She made the mistake of reporting me to Child Protective Services. They did not have to tell me she reported me. I already knew. I told her she could not move in with me. The very next week, I received a call from Child Protective Services. They quickly figured out it was a false report and never opened a case on me. A month later, I found out this woman had an active warrant for her arrest. I turned her in and told the police exactly where to find her. She was arrested and spent 18 months in state prison. She had to fight her in-laws for custody of her daughter. Story 2. My cousin's husband inherited a large plot of valuable land. His sister also inherited a different large plot of land in another part of the country. He was young at the time, about 18, and his sister was 35. She deceived him and ended up with the more valuable piece of land. Many years passed, and she was finally ready to sell the now highly valued land, expecting to make millions selling to a developer. However, there were 2 endangered species on the land, so no developer wanted to deal with it, and it became essentially worthless. She tried to trick him again, claiming there had been a paperwork mix-up years ago. She said she wanted to correct it by giving him back the land that was supposed to be his and taking back what he now owned. He had not spoken to his sister in years and suspected something was wrong because she was always deceitful. He decided to contact a local lawyer. Before he finished explaining the situation, the lawyer said, "I know all about this property. Because of the endangered species and the land's value, the story had appeared in the local newspaper." The lawyer advised him to ignore his sister and keep his land, which he was eventually able to sell for a few million. His sister was left with the worthless piece of land. No one, including him, ever liked his sister, so we were all glad that things turned out the way they did. Story 3. Uncle cheated on my aunt, my dad's sister. She killed herself, and he married his mistress before she was buried. The new wife ended up stealing most of his money and divorced him within 8 months. He moved to Hawaii. His house burned down in fires there, and now he is broke and homeless. Rest in peace, Aunt Joan. Story 4. Bully got married and divorced due to his domestic violence issues. He tried to break into his ex's home one night, and her new boyfriend was waiting for him. He shot him dead. Story 5. My sister's high school bully was merciless. He was a popular wrestler and had his followers harassing her as well. They would pour drinks on her. They followed her from class to class making oinking sounds. They damaged her car on a weekly basis. And that was only a fraction of it. My sister went on independent study because the administration did absolutely nothing to stop it. The bully and 3 of his friends were in a horrible car accident in 11th grade. The bully was the only survivor. He had major brain trauma and could no longer speak. He was also paralyzed from the waist down and confined to a wheelchair. He was trapped inside his own body. His father spent his insurance settlement in less than a year, and eventually he was sent to a rehabilitation facility where he deteriorated and died at 20 years old. When the school brought in grief counselors after the accident, the main feeling that the students discussed was guilt because many of them had been praying for something like this to happen to the bully and his friends. Story 6. I know it's awful, but I was classmates with the nephew of our vice principal at school. He was a bully and physically abusive, especially towards me. About a year after I moved schools, my aunt was no longer vice principal. Suddenly, he was severely beaten every week, sometimes to the point he had to be checked in the emergency room. I still don't feel sorry for him. Story 7. My friend in high school was groomed by a much older man. He abused her in every way and turned her into a shell of her former self. A few years after she was able to get away from him, we learned he was stabbed to death during a mugging. Good riddance. Story 8. My dad adopted his 3 grandchildren. For years, they treated him poorly and were extremely entitled. They would walk around his office and tell his staff, "When he dies, you won't have a job. I'm keeping the car. I'm keeping the family business." And my favorite, They told people they didn't need to save or work because they were going to be millionaires. Well, my dad passed away and they got nothing. That is definitely a terrible outcome for them. Now they are broke millionaires, I guess. Story 9. My bully from high school humiliated me every day. Then, one day after summer, he had a diarrhea explosion during the math lesson. Story 10. A man who used to stalk me became involved with hard drugs and started associating with the wrong crowd. He eventually became homeless. He was found in the middle of the jungle, bound, beaten, and then set on fire. The autopsy showed he was still alive when set on fire. He was imprisoned years ago for molesting his son, then later for stalking and assaulting his ex-wife. After their separation, he would deceive men online and send them to her house for sex. I lived in fear for years, thinking I might encounter him again. Reading the article in all its gruesome detail made me feel relieved that he received what he deserved and will never harm anyone again. Story 11. My bully was injured after messing with the wrong people. I do not approve of the action, but he definitely had it coming. Story 12. He ran for public office and was soundly defeated. He could not secure an endorsement from anyone and received poor evaluations from the local press and a low vote count. I would bet his fiancée did not even vote for him. Having known him since high school, college, and beyond, his personality, how he treated others, and his complete laziness when it came to making even the slightest effort made his defeat well-deserved. I hope he learned something from it, but nothing about him suggests that is likely. Frankly, that was a victory for his district. Story 13. I used to be friends with a guy who felt like he could be an asshole but expected people to just accept it because that's how he is. That's fine, but then don't complain that nobody wants to be friends with you. He would brag about having no filter and then complain that people were mean to him right after. We ended up having a falling out after he did something backstabbing to me. Before that, he had already lost most of his other friends. Then he was arrested and convicted for trying to pursue a 9th grader when he was 27. It was ironic since he claimed to be a male feminist. I do not respect him. Story 14. A bully from my high school went to a Division I college for football in the South. He ended up tearing his anterior cruciate ligament in his first game and, to my knowledge, never played again. Story 15. My uncle was always accusing undocumented immigrants of not paying taxes. He was sentenced to federal prison for tax evasion. Story 16. The former abusive spouse of a family member of mine was found murdered in his car. Considering the condition in which he was found, I suspect he beat and assaulted the wrong woman this time. His tongue was severed, and his penis had been shoved down his throat. Story 17. A bully in high school constantly started fights with me. One day, I was having a very bad day, and he decided to sucker punch me while I was eating lunch. I ended up snapping and punching him as hard as I could. I knocked him out and broke his jaw. He suffered from constant issues and pain in his jaw after that. Story 18. I went on a school trip for my club as I was the president. My vice president also went. Her mom was our chaperone along with the teacher for the class the club was part of. She and her mom bullied me because her mom wanted her daughter to be president. I was not looking forward to this trip because of that. However, I still had a lot of fun. The leadership conferences were great. We went to Six Flags. I mostly did everything on my own because of the ongoing bullying. We went to Joe's Crab Shack, which we do not have where we live, and had a lovely dinner. That's when we found out my vice president is allergic to crab. It was not deadly but enough to make her very uncomfortable for the rest of the trip, so she had to sit out. She also got hives from heat stroke after not taking her jacket off at Six Flags in Texas in May, which I had repeatedly warned could happen. Story 19. A schoolmate's mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She underwent aggressive treatment, lost her hair, had a mastectomy, and endured a challenging journey. During this time, her husband had an affair and left her, filing for divorce. The mother made a full recovery, and a few years later, the father died of cancer. Absolutely no one felt sorry for him. Story 20. My skinhead neighbor called me the N-word. I am brown. Every day as I was walking to the bus stop. One day, A group of black men happened to turn the corner just as he said it. He received a big promotion through free tattoo removal. Story 21. He sexually assaulted a girl when she was unconscious from alcohol. A year later, he was permanently paralyzed in a car accident. Story 22. My ex-brother-in-law, whom I have known for most of my 60 years, kidnapped my children at the request of my ex-husband. I was absolutely devastated. Fast forward more than 30 years, and I am going to a graduation and birthday party. My ex-brother-in-law will be there, but I understand he is now disabled, can barely move and needs help. That in itself is the best revenge. No happy retirement for him. I plan to smile at him every chance I get. He has known me long enough to understand my intent. I am very much looking forward to it. Story 23. A guy I knew who was a pathological liar once tried to get me to help him with something. The details go somewhere shady, though he did not say exactly where. Meet some people where my job was to stand there holding a gun. This is when I realized he was either crazy or joking, and I needed to find out which. Somehow this would result in profit. I told him that I did not know how to use a gun to make him drop it, and he said, "You will not have to. You just have to look scary. Anyway, you have a car and we will need one." That was in college. I distanced myself from him. His identity was built around being adopted from Russia, but a few years later I was working with a mutual friend who told me that he had met the guy's mother. She responded, "What? American version of the name we knew him by. Grew up in Scottsdale." A few years after that, I was telling someone at a different job about this guy, and they found a newspaper article about him. It turns out he had convinced another mutual friend of ours to actually go through with a plan similar to the one he had tried to involve me in. The plan was to rob his drug dealer at gunpoint in front of the dealer's apartment. The mutual friend was killed, and the man known as the Russian is now in prison, believed to be for life, for the death. Story 24. A kid who made fun of me for being bald and scrawny in school by calling me Cancer Boy died of cancer when we were in our early 20s. Story 25. Got intoxicated in college, and a few years later, the man hit a snowplow on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and died. Justice was served. Story 26. She called my hair ugly. It got worn out from swimming and stressing around a terminally ill mother. Now her hairline is lost in Timbuktu, and my golden locks are long and luscious, slowly returning to bouncy, shiny glory. Not as bad as others, but I felt vindicated. Story 27. A former friend who adopted extremist views was later assaulted at a heavy metal concert for making a Nazi salute. Story 28. I was tormented by a difficult boy in high school. He had a muscle car he was extremely proud of. I ordered a tailpipe whistle online and left class a little early to install it in his tailpipe. Then I sat in my car to watch. He started the car and the most horrible sound came out, like 10 belts slipping at once while 15 people whistled. He slammed out of his car in the middle of the lot, holding up everyone else trying to leave. He opened his hood, turned the car off, turned it back on, and walked around it 3 or 4 times, growing more and more angry while other students honked at him. He finally looked at his tailpipe but didn't see anything. After a couple more times around the car, by now he was screaming while I was doubled over laughing. He went back to the tailpipe, stuck his hand in it, and found the whistle. He threw it on the pavement, drove over it, backed up, and drove over it again. He left tire marks as he peeled out of the parking lot. The next day, I spread the word that I had been the one to prank him. He was so embarrassed he never even looked at me the rest of the year. Story 29. One of the most dishonest and manipulative people I know was conned out of most of his money by an OnlyFans account that claimed to be a well-known adult film star. I am not upset after all the damage his lies caused to the people around me. Story 30. I made peace with the girl who bullied me terribly for 2 years during high school, right before graduation. And I mean severe bullying. She dumped hot soup on me once and set my hair on fire another time, just to film my reaction and post it on social media. The day before graduation, she apologized and invited me to take a looping selfie for Instagram with my classmates. We were supposed to jump in the air and shout, "Seniors!" She jumped and sprained both her ankles. She was on crutches at graduation and had to return her $600 designer heels. Story 31. My uncle has severe diabetes, multiple strokes, and many broken teeth, and now he soils himself. He stole his mother's, my grandmother's, life savings. I hope he faces justice. Story 32. My ex-husband was an abusive, dishonest, and unfaithful alcoholic who tormented me mentally during our marriage to justify his binge drinking. He died last month, broke and alone, in a hotel room from cardiac arrest caused by excessive alcohol consumption. I actually feel a little sorry for him. Story 33. One of my bullies who nearly caused me to harm myself back in 8th grade was struck by a semi-truck while she was horseback riding along a busy highway. Story 34. I was abused physically and emotionally by my 6th and 7th grade teacher. Just when I started high school, she died. Story 35. A man I knew was cheated on, divorced, accused of stealing at work, and fired, all within a couple of months. He was a total jerk, and no one felt sorry for him. Story 36. This one's not very interesting, but it does make me happy to think about. In senior year of high school, my best friend of 3 years suddenly blocked me on everything and started spreading rumors about me. She turned nearly all of my friends against me. I was harassed for several months, stalked in person and online, physically and verbally bullied, harassed by unknown numbers and told to kill myself, that I was a narcissist, and that no one loved me, all while she tried to claim I was doing all of that to her. It got to the point where I actually attempted suicide. I spent a month in the hospital. The harassment continued for a few months after I got out, with her finding out about the hospitalization and encouraging me to try again, but eventually, I think she just got bored of me not responding. I really fell behind on my work at this point. I didn't think I was going to graduate or get into college. It took a lot of effort, but I managed to pull my grade point average up to a 3.5 from a 2.7 in the last 3 months and got into a Big Ten school, which was way better than I was hoping for. This is relevant because at graduation, I was reading through the program, and they put in there that she wasn't going to college. I found out later she applied and was not accepted anywhere. Again, it's not really that dramatic, but after all the humiliation she put me through and all the things she said I couldn't do, knowing that everyone knew this girl couldn't even get into a state school made me feel a little like she got what she deserved. Story 37. Almost every one of my high school bullies became pregnant at 17. No wedding rings in sight either. Story 38. One of my childhood friend's mothers was killed by a child during her morning jog. It was dark, and he was speeding on hilly country roads. He showed no genuine guilt or remorse. A few years later, at a football game, he made a comment I did not like. "Hey kid, be like me. Be a killer." I was not sure if it was related to football or his previous actions, but it was unsettling. A couple of years later, he was killed when he was hit by a car while changing a tire on the shoulder of a highway. Story 39. My ex-wife cheated several times and had me arrested on false allegations twice. I finally left her, and a couple of years later she became an alcoholic and was addicted to pain pills and Xanax. She ended up involved in a serious hit-and-run situation and went to prison for 5 years. Story 40. A really mean manager at my work got cancer and died young. I remember when I worked for her, really hot coffee spilled on my arm, and she would not let me take care of it right away because we had a line. I got a second-degree burn and a scar because of it. Story 41. I was a kid spinning in circles during lunchtime just to get dizzy. 12-year-old me didn't understand what was wrong with that. But then my non-friend Daniel took the opportunity to bull rush me and knock me flat on the ground in front of everyone. He genuinely flattened me, and I just looked at him in complete disbelief and disgust. Like, you actually took an opportunity where I couldn't defend myself and hurt me? You were dead to me. A year later, in high school, I was milling around the commons like anyone else. I noticed Daniel walking down the hallway, minding his own business. Then a much bigger student from an older grade punched Daniel in the face so hard that the force knocked him flat. His face was bloody and snotty, and I was glad I got a front row view. Thanks, random kid. Forget you, Daniel. Story 42. A man I knew joined the organized crime group and carried a significant grudge. Members of organized crime groups often have shorter lifespans, and he was no exception. Story 43. A colleague who treated me poorly, lied about me to management, and caused me significant stress during my pregnancy ended up off work sick with anxiety. He shared on LinkedIn how much he was struggling daily. Could not have happened to a more deserving person. Story 44. I was bullied really badly in high school. There was one girl who was the worst and encouraged others to be awful to me. It was bad enough that my parents had to get involved with the school and escalate the situation because it was relentless. Anyway, she is dead. She overdosed about 2 years after high school. Could not have happened to a better person. Story 45. A girl I used to work with was very unpleasant to everyone. In high school, my sibling was randomly beaten by someone and had major medical issues afterward. This girl took a video and spread it around because she thought it was funny. She regularly stole tips and would leave her closing shifts for other people to do all the work. A year or two later, she became an addict and contacted everyone she knew begging for money. I just replied laughing. Story 46. A former friend married her high school boyfriend. Around the same time, she inherited a large sum of money. Less than a year into her marriage, she cheated on her husband with a white supremacist police officer 20 years her senior. Her husband emptied their joint accounts, bought himself an expensive car, and left town with at least $200,000. Before I learned about the new racist boyfriend, I felt awful for her. But once all the details became known and she started expressing the same hateful views as her boyfriend, I stopped supporting her and have not spoken to her since. Story 47. My friend was sexually assaulted by another friend who purposely got her drunk to take advantage of her. This happened about 10 to 15 years ago. A couple of years ago, there was a huge wildfire and many people lost their homes. I found out through social media that the person who assaulted my friend lost their home, but their neighbors on both sides did not. They were homeless for months. Insurance covered much of the damage, but they were still tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I do not feel sorry for them. They deserved it. Story 48. My stepfather's sister's husband left work for the day and walked to his car. He ran a dental practice. He put the key in the car door, had a heart attack, and fell into a ditch beside the car. Even though many people were still in the building and many people were driving by, no one saw him or helped him. He was found hours later, deceased. Do not punish your children with cruel and unusual methods such as cutting their monograms out of all the towels, taking away their furniture, or forcing them to walk miles home. Story 49. A local criminal who thought nothing of beating up and robbing people, usually smaller and younger individuals unless assisted by an accomplice, was eventually beaten up and died in a street fight. Story 50. A coworker of mine refused to believe that coronavirus disease 2019 was real. He spent a lot of time mocking those of us who took the pandemic seriously. He also frequently attended large festivals and car shows with many people. He contracted coronavirus disease 2019, was hospitalized, intubated, and died. Story 51. One victim did not deserve it, but it was ironic at least. I had a teacher in high school who was exactly what you picture when asked to imagine an Alabama public school coach and government teacher. He used his classroom as a pulpit for some wildly inappropriate sermons. In no particular order and not all-encompassing, some of his antics included making all the students line up from right to left in order of their political leanings, then using that information to harass anyone who did not self-identify as right-wing. Pausing class so he could laugh and mock the fact that a black student pronounced the word children as cheerin' when excited. Requiring students to only use approved sources like Fox News and Newsmax for assignments. The story I want to focus on, though, is when he dedicated an entire class period to ranting about how stupid he found the Affordable Care Act to be. His reasoning boiled down to how his perfectly healthy 20-something son should not be required to have health insurance. Well, his perfectly healthy son overdosed and died roughly 2 years following this rant. Sadly, the son was between jobs, struggled with addiction, and did not have insurance coverage for rehabilitation. His family was not able to crowdsource rehab money on a public school teacher salary, and sadly, the addiction won out before the son could get the help he needed. I felt terrible for the son when I heard the news. That same coach and teacher suffered a freak injury some time later and is now paralyzed from the neck down. What a pity healthcare was not more affordable or accessible, or maybe he could have gotten that surgery and regained the ability to walk. But knowing how much the coach detested socialized medicine, I cackled like a hyena when I heard about him. Story 52. A relative stole money from the family business while lying about the finances. He spent it all on himself and his wife. He suffered a stroke and became disabled afterward. While I hate seeing people suffer, what he did to my family was ethically wrong. I do not empathize with people who do not deserve my empathy. Story 53. A man married someone who showed many warning signs, and everyone advised him against it. However, he insisted, ended relationships with his friends and family. 3 children later, she left him. Sorry, we all warned you. Story 54. The supervisor was generally unpleasant and deliberately biased against women on staff, mistreating, harassing, and abusing them. His boss protected him, and he thought he could continue working for several more years to maximize his retirement benefits. His wife, who was also difficult, had already left her job and retired early based on his plan to continue working and maximize their benefits. I filed a gender-based harassment lawsuit against him and got him fired. His finances are ruined. His wife had to find another job, and he is miserable. Story 55. A teacher in high school who openly showed favoritism, xenophobia, and was generally unpleasant got fired for drinking at work. Story 56. A woman who had a memory like a Rolodex could, given a moment, rattle off history, math equations, trivia, and anything else someone needed. She prided herself on a large circle of friends and acquaintances. She was also a vicious gossip who made up and tested out tidbits on her children. If her children were shocked or horrified by what she said, she took it as a sign to spread the rumor. She spread one rumor too many, and her friends disappeared. Then she developed dementia, and her memory vanished. She died alone in a hospital from COVID-19. No family member shed tears. Her husband of 47 years has not cried, nor does he speak of her. Story 57. Most of the popular girls who bullied and terrorized everyone beneath them no longer have friends like they used to or a life outside of missing high school. All the people they bullied are off in college, starting families, entering healthcare, film, and other fields. They are still arguing with each other online and posting about their terrible boyfriend, whom they cannot seem to leave, between posts about their amazing boyfriend. Story 58. Years ago, I suffered a miscarriage. My stepsister told me that it was God's plan. When she got pregnant, she had to deliver a stillborn baby because her state, Idaho, banned abortions. She cannot get pregnant again, and her husband divorced her so he could start a family with another woman. Every time I visit my dad, there is always a discussion about how she has not found another partner since. All God's plan, as she would say. Story 59. My former bully was involved in a fatal car crash at 19. He had not bothered me for years, but I knew he was dealing drugs, and I had seen him bully a 13-year-old about a month before he died. I have no sympathy for him. He earned an early grave. Story 60. One of my former close friends was arrested for attempting to molest a young girl at a local lake restroom. He is currently on trial facing 24 years in prison and will likely endure great suffering during that time. While it is not entirely terrible what he is experiencing, he definitely deserves it. Story 61. My first sexual experience turned into rape when I said no and he forced my knees open. I was 14 and he was 21. About 10 years ago, I looked him up online and discovered he was in jail for child sexual abuse. I am sad that I did not report him then, but I am glad he was finally caught and incarcerated. Story 62. My high school bully is in jail for filming himself sexually assaulting his drugged, unconscious partners. He tried to make himself into a local hero as we grew up and was doing well for himself until one of his former partner's parents found the videos. Story 63. A property owner in a nearby city was refusing to mow or care for his property. His neighbors contacted the city repeatedly, but the city was slow to respond. One neighbor finally went to the local television station to get the situation addressed. The television reporter investigated and discovered that this property and many others were owned by relatives and associates of a city assessor. The assessor was undervaluing some properties up for auction after foreclosure and providing his relatives with inside information about the true value of the properties, allowing them to profit significantly. The situation caused an uproar. The assessor lost his job, and criminal charges were filed against those involved. All because one person who was benefiting from exploiting the system refused to maintain his property. Story 64. During the summer of 2020, a local pawn shop was posting racist content about Black Lives Matter activists. Recently, the owner was raided by the state police for allegedly organizing thefts of local department stores and faces up to 20 years in prison. Story 65. In high school, a bully started picking on me for being a punk rock kid. It was mainly trash talking and the occasional shove while walking the halls. I was a senior and didn't want to get expelled, so I just took it. The bullying escalated to them throwing lunch items at me. After months of this, I had enough and messaged him on AOL Instant Messenger. I don't want to get expelled, so do whatever you want at school. But if I catch you on the street, I'm kicking your ass. He and his friends decided to take boxing and kickboxing lessons to jump me at the same gym where I happened to be an instructor. By then, I had 9 years of experience across various disciplines and was competing and doing demonstrations regularly. I stayed professional and taught them the basics, but when I demonstrated kicks, I hit the bag as hard as I could, making a loud, intimidating thud. Only my 2 best friends knew I practiced martial arts. I kept it quiet because I knew insecure guys might challenge me just to prove themselves. While not necessarily terrible, it must have been a huge blow to their egos. Story 66. Wife's stepfather was a person who was constantly drunk or under the influence. He would say racist things. He picked a fight with a young neighbor, got beaten, and kept threatening him and his younger brother. The neighbor shot him dead. He finally got what was coming to him. Story 67. After criticizing crackdowns and masking, and posting photos of herself at large gatherings every weekend, a Facebook friend of mine and her family contracted coronavirus disease, including her mother, who was hospitalized. Then she had the audacity to ask for everyone's prayers. Story 68. This man who used to live on my street was murdered. He was abusive and had it coming, but everyone said he was a good person. He was not. He was harmful, and the world is better off without him. Story 69. Years ago, my boss told me that when she was in high school, a well-known author spoke at her school and singled her out during the speech, being mean to her. She felt humiliated. Years later, she was working as a travel agent for a publisher, and guess which author they had? It was up to my boss to book the author's next trip, and she booked the worst hotel she could find, a pay-by-the-hour, nasty flea bag. This was years before the internet, so it was hard to find out how bad the hotel was ahead of time. The author was furious and demanded that my boss be fired. She told her boss the whole high school story and kept her job. Story 70. This kid in elementary school was very unpleasant. Luckily, he wasn't in my class, but some of my friends had him in theirs. He was mean and used to call people offensive names. I do not know where he got that from, but now that I am grown, I suspect it was his parents. One day, he brought a knife to school, and another student reported him. He got expelled, and nobody ever heard from him again. Story 71. 2 occasions when I worked in a high-security prison stand out. First, a bully from primary school who sucker punched me in class, and then an ex-manager who was a complete narcissistic person. Both ended up as my prisoners. The looks on their faces when they recognized me were unforgettable. Both tried to be friendly, hoping I could make their lives a little easier. But they were disabused of the notion when I warned them that they must address me as officer or boss, and that I am not their friend. Their title was Prisoner XXX. They would receive everything they were legally allowed and nothing else. Watching their expressions fall was priceless. So watch who you bully. That person might end up being your jailer one day. For those who think I then abused them, grow up. That behavior belongs in movies, and we do not do that. It was my job to keep them safe and secure, and that is exactly what I did. Story 72. I briefly worked in healthcare for the state prison system. An inmate died a slow and agonizing death from a chronic illness while in our facility. It was my job to gather his medical records for storage. Within those records, I found a description of his criminal conviction: sexual assault on a minor under 12 years of age. Story 73. In the UK, a girl in my year at secondary school was a bully and caused issues. I had a few run-ins with her, and she got me into trouble a lot. Once, I could have been excluded, but a teacher saw the incident and told the head of year. I was allowed to return to my classes, and the teacher apologized to me. About 10 years ago, she posted online saying how life was unfair. Apparently, her family tried to move to Australia, but she was denied a visa due to some charges and minor convictions when she was between 16 and 18 years old. I just laughed. She is now divorced. Her ex-husband and their grown-up son, who is now an adult, moved to Australia. Story 74. My high school bully had the habit of pushing me into the wall every day on my way to class. I was a shy kid, too scared to stand up for myself. He was a big hockey player, and when the season started, he suffered an injury. I swear, a skate cut very close to one of his main arteries, and he almost bled out. He was in a cast for a while after that, and I did not have to deal with him for some time. In my eyes, karma served justice. Story 75. My abusive ex was diagnosed with testicular cancer a few months after we separated. He survived but lost one of his testicles. Story 76. One of the worst bullies in my high school suffered severe permanent brain damage from a snowmobiling accident. Many times, bullies project because of their upbringing. However, she had a perfect home life and genuinely took pleasure in hurting other people. Otherwise, I would feel bad. Story 77. My stepfather died. He was, for lack of a better word, a complete swindler. There was always a scam or a sneaky way around things. He always did things the easy way, not the right way. He would go to Aldi and take coins out of the carts that people left behind for others and then brag about how much money he made that day. If you go around collecting carts from the parking lot, then sure, keep the quarter, but he would take all the quarters from carts just sitting in the store's cart area. He would scream at my mother's tenants for being on time with rent on the 5th because he wanted it on the 1st, even though it wasn't due yet. The same man would scream on the phone if a bill collector dared to call him, even when he was actually late. He did not like being pointed out that he did the same thing to his tenants and got mad when they didn't pay, so why didn't he give that same energy to the bill collector? Someday, my mother will get sued for things he did and hid in her house. At one point, the ceiling was dripping under the bathroom. He had a bucket there for about 2 years. He would bring it down, empty it, and put it back up. When she needed to sell the house, because he got her into massive debt by refusing to work unless he had a bill that was past due, she emptied the bucket, put it back, and drywalled the ceiling. At some point, that bucket is going to overflow, and she'll be sued because he died the minute the money from the house was spent. There are many other incidents, but my very last interaction with him was when he raised his hand to hit my child. It looked like he was going to hit him across the face because my child asked him a question, and when he answered, my son asked another question for clarification. These were legitimate questions, and he just lost it. When he started screaming, the veins on his forehead popped out. His face turned red, he started sweating, and his eyes bugged out. I thought he was going to have a heart attack more than once. In fact, saying he was going to have a heart attack and it would be someone's fault when he was upset was his favorite thing to say. He didn't want to answer questions. That day, he raised his hand. I grabbed my child by the back of his shirt, pulled him away, and made him get in the car. My child was 20 years old, so not little, but it was worse that he raised his hand like he was going to hit him in the face. I freaked out, screamed, told him I hoped he died, and drove away. 13 days later, he died. Life happens, I suppose. Story 78. I run an animal rescue and rehabilitation organization. A fellow rehabilitator used to become very possessive of animals. If another rescuer took in an animal she wanted, she would bully them and the person delivering the animal so she could get her way. She spread ridiculous rumors about other rescuers so people would avoid giving animals to them. This drove many good rescuers away from the field altogether. My rescue has a small but somewhat unhinged and petty following, so when she targeted me, I received a number of donations in her name. This happened about 6 years ago, And I still receive donations labeled demon witch because she tried telling everyone I was an actual demonic witch. She faced significant criticism as a result. I also have a lot of support and dedicated volunteers, which allows me to take vacations when necessary. She doesn't have that because she treated everyone like competition. Now, every time I take a vacation, people hear her complain about how busy she is, how she never gets vacations, how she can't keep up with all the animals, and how she lacks enough donations to care for them. It is no one's fault but hers. Nobody wants to help her because she tried to bully her way to the top. Story 79. Dated a girl for 5 years. We lived together for 3. Found out she was cheating with a couple of different people. We fought and she moved out. I got myself checked and was clean. About a week after I got my results, she called to notify me that she had contracted a sexually transmitted infection. Story 80. My unpleasant principal was T-boned and paralyzed from the waist down when I was in 10th grade. The only thing I regret is that I was not the driver. Story 81. My abusive ex-husband, who was both sexually and physically abusive, ended up rolling his vehicle while drunk, shattered his leg, and required half of it to be amputated. I stopped being afraid of him as soon as I realized he could never catch me if I ran away. Story 82. Someone I once knew was a liar, cheater, misogynistic woman abuser, child predator, poor husband and father, and narcissistic life ruiner. He has cancer now and very little time left. I am sad for his grown children and grandchildren who still love him. He has never abused them, and I don't think they are aware of his dark past. But I know. The other victims know. Story 83. I was a chief court clerk. I hired this woman from someone I respected. From the beginning, there was drama. 6 months after she started working there, a police officer came by and wanted to talk to me. It was unusual. He told me he ran a background check on Tambi. She was involved in a murder. 3 of her friends, 2 males and 1 female, decided to rob a family. Tambi stayed back to watch one of their kids. They didn't rob just any house. They robbed the house of the girl with the 2 guys. Her family was wealthy. She knew her parents would not be there. When they got there, they realized her sister was home. She was jealous of her sister, so they decided to kill her. It was violent, and she did most of the beating. They robbed the family and went back to the house. Tambi took the bloody clothes and tried to wash the blood out. They knew they had to run. They took off. The parents figured it was their daughter because there was no forced entry. The police started looking for them. They eventually caught them. Tambi got in trouble too, but did not have to spend much time in jail. When she got out, she reconnected with an old boyfriend. He was involved in robbery and other crimes. The police knew where they were. Sensing that Tambi and this man started running, she drove. Eventually, the police found them. She spent 8 years in prison. I did not know any of this. I talked to my judge, and he said if she hadn't killed anyone, it was fine. I said, well, at the time, she was very good at her job. Eventually, she started causing problems with my other deputy clerks. She was always overly friendly to people she thought she could get something from. She lived with this man long enough for him to pay for breast augmentation surgery for her. When someone came into the office, she was always talking about it. She even took a few women into the bathroom. This was very unprofessional. She also wore low-cut tops. I talked to the judge. He told me he had not seen her dressed like that. I told him she did not dress that way on Mondays and Fridays because he was there. He told me to call him when she dressed like that. The next day, she wore a very low-cut top. I let him know. He came over and was very angry. He yelled at her in front of other people in the office. She decided she wanted my job, so she started trying to take it. She would go to the judge's office and speak badly about me. I sensed this, so I talked to him. He told Tambi and me that whomever comes and talks about others is the one with the problem. I knew she talked to him, so I called him to remind him. In the meantime, she got involved with a motorcycle group. I believe they were called the Aryan Brotherhood. They are very racist. She put a rebel flag on her desk and a couple of other racial items. First of all, we are a government office. It was very offensive, and my daughter was dating and later married a black man. We could get sued. I am her boss, and I told her to remove these things, but she did not. I informed the judge. He came to the office and yelled at her in front of other people. My goal was to outlast her. She went to a family reunion where she met a cousin. They got married. I outlasted her. They got divorced. She has been spiraling out of control since then. Story 84. My mom constantly told me she hoped that I would have a daughter who was just like me because I was horrible to her. I was a child doing things that children do. I did have a daughter, and she is just like me. My mother has not spoken to her or seen a picture of her in 3 years. My only regret was not cutting her out before I had a child. Goodbye, Vicky. Story 85. I rejected a guy in my teens. I liked him, but he was very immature. I don't think he was particularly into me either. It was his ego that got hurt. I ended up kissing his friend on a night out. He then drunkenly hooked up with my best friend, told all his friends about it the next day, exaggerating details and essentially slut-shaming her. He then proceeded to add my underage cousin on social media. He dated her for several years. I truly believe part of that was to spite me. She eventually dumped him. He rebounded and got married within a year. The wife, after a few years and having a child, realized what a poor choice she had made. She has now taken the child and divorced him. He is now a joke of a man in his late 30s, getting drunk in Ibiza and chasing 20-year-olds. He will never grow up, and he deserves the sad, lonely existence he has now. Story 86. My cousin stole the girlfriend of his younger brother. He had 3 children with her. Then she left him for a university teacher and left him with 3 children under 5. Our family still comments on my cousin's situation. Story 87. My abusive ex threatened to kill me when I broke up with him and stalked me for months, trying to find my new address. His former best friend told me recently that my ex went on a dating show thinking he was a catch, and every single woman rejected him immediately. Most of his friends also stopped talking to him because of his claims that he could make one much younger friend in our group straight by sleeping with them. Now, the only friends he has left are the ones he openly hated back in the day. Story 88. I had a bully in college. He was the passive-aggressive kind. I had to take a pottery course to fulfill an art requirement, and he would come into the lab at night and damage projects of students who were better than he was. I found out later he was in an automobile accident and became paralyzed from the neck down. Story 89. A man I knew was hit by a car and died. He was a known sexual offender and had assaulted numerous girls. He would get them blackout drunk and then take advantage of them. A girl I dated had experienced this before we started dating. Many people tried to have the skate park named after him when he died, but fortunately nothing happened. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.